There's a good chance the hair dye in your bathroom is named in an active cancer lawsuit. One of the chemicals inside it was banned from paint strippers. Too toxic to strip a door, evidently fine for your scalp. Still perfectly legal in hair dye. You bought it at the drugstore. You used it for years. Nobody mentioned any of that because nobody had to. In April 2026, Consumer Reports pulled 23 at-home dye kits and ran them through a lab. Every single one came back carrying toxic chemicals. Not most of them, all 23. And the salon workers who breathed this for 30 years, they're in a California courtroom right now, with the brands seated across the aisle. So, the list. 6 brands that need to leave your cabinet, 4 that have quietly been doing it right, and 3 chemical names that expose the difference in 5 seconds. We start with the brand that spent the most making you trust it, and the least earning it. Worst, number 6, Schwarzkopf Color Ultime, Igora Royal, Henkel. The campaign shows an elite athlete at peak performance, every choice in her life optimized. The message underneath isn't subtle. Serious women choose this. You've seen the ad 100 times. So the disciplined, health-conscious, optimized choice turns out to be endocrine disruption with a gold medalist on the lid. Pick up a box of Color Ultime. Admire the athlete on the front. Now turn it over. The resorcinol and the ammonia are right there. The endorsement is on the front. The chemistry's on the back. They are very rarely telling the same story. Resorcinol is an endocrine-disrupting chemical. It interferes with your thyroid hormones and gets classified as an immune system toxicant. Ammonia is the smell that hits when you crack the developer open. That smell isn't the product working. It's a chemical loud enough that Consumer Reports' own focus groups named the fumes as their single biggest fear before the dye had touched one's scalp. And the lived experience matches the lab. A chemical reek that moves into the bathroom and brings a headache with it. A color that lands a shade or two off the box. And dye that bleeds onto pillowcases and towels for days. Then, April 2026. Consumer Reports tests 23 stats and finds methylene chloride, a probable human carcinogen, in all 23. Color Ultime carries the standard load. Nothing special, which is the problem. Schwarzkopf's response, once the results went public, was that the brand remains firmly committed to the highest safety standards for its consumers. Committed to safety, after the lab report already had its name on it. Nothing focuses a safety commitment quite like a published test result. Now walk one shelf over to Igora Royal, Schwarzkopf's professional salon line, same parent company, Henkel. Henkel is now a defendant in bladder cancer suits filed by former stylists who spent decades applying these dyes and who, according to those lawsuits, now spend their afternoons in oncology. Henkel is also named in the June 2025 Consolidated California Hair Dye litigation, right alongside L'Oreal and Clairol. Consumer line, salon line, one corporation, and a heartfelt statement about safety that arrived only after the lab did. Schwarzkopf sold you a woman who takes flawless care of herself. The formula did not get the memo. And the place that exposure really stacks up is the salon, where the same chemistry gets applied 6 times a day by the people who trusted it most. Worst. Number 5. John Paul Mitchell Systems. Carl Kimbley got his cosmetology license in 1981. For the next 3 decades, he worked 5 days a week, 2 or 3 color applications a day. John Paul Mitchell Color XG in his hands for most of it. His bladder cancer diagnosis came in 2024. He's now suing the company, and the allegation is simple. Nobody ever warned him that the product he pressed into clients' scalps every working day could do this. Here's where people want to ask whether the brand actually knew. According to the lawsuits, yes. And the way they got away with saying nothing runs straight through the Food and Drug Administration. John Paul Mitchell built its whole identity on being the professional's choice. The first professional-only salon brand in America, sold only through licensed cosmetologists. And professional only feels like a safety guarantee. If it lives behind the salon chair, surely it cleared a higher bar than the drugstore. It cleared the exact same bar. The Food and Drug Administration's cosmetics framework doesn't require pre-market safety testing for hair dye. Not the drugstore box, not the salon bottle. Professional grade is a rating for pigment consistency. It was never a safety credential. You just assumed it was, because they let you. The oxidative dye playbook inside Color XG is the same one running through every lawsuit on this list. aromatic amines, developers, the permanent dye toolkit, and a stylist running 6 color services a day racks up an exposure a customer doing her own roots 6 times a year cannot come close to. The danger isn't in the bottle so much as in the repetition. Carl had 34 years of repetition, 34 years of his business. The box never spent one sentence of it on a warning. John Paul Mitchell sold to professionals. The next brand sold to women who were certain they were making the healthy choice and put fruit on the box to prove it. Worst, number 4. Garnier Nutrisse. Nutrisse. Nutrition plus tresses, welded into one word engineered to sit in your brain right next to vitamin. A made-up word doing the job of a health claim no lawyer would ever sign off on out loud. Avocado oil on the front. Olive oil. Shea. The entire product identity is basically a smoothie. So let's pour out the smoothie. In April 2026, Consumer Reports found DEHP, a phthalate, in only 4 of the 23 products it tested. Nutrisse was one of the 4. DEHP is the kind of phthalate research has tied to hormone disruption, cardiovascular problems, and reproductive harm. Out of 23 boxes, the avocado one made the short list. That is a hard thing to print next to a piece of fruit. What the box does admit, quietly and in the fine print, is an allergy alert confirming phenylenediamines and resorcinol are in there. Resorcinol, the same thyroid disruptor from a minute ago, flagged by independent scientists for 30 years. Run Nutrisse through the Environmental Working Group's database, and you don't get a green light. You get a mid-range hazard score, which is the polite scientific way of saying, we're not thrilled. And the irony runs to the bathroom sink. Since the nourishing reformulation, the cream squeezes out like wet Play-Doh, dries hair to straw, and leaves more than a few scalps stinging. Quite a feat for a product named after nutrition. None of it is banned. The concern has just been on the record since before some of the women buying this box were born. And the part that should sting, that avocado wasn't a garnish, it was the argument. The box was built, on purpose, for the woman reaching past the others because she's trying to make the safer choice, and steering her straight into phenylenediamines and a phthalate. Garnier is a L'Oreal Group brand, by the way. The same parent Consumer Reports flagged for the highest methylene chloride levels in the entire category. The same parent named in multiple active cancer lawsuits. The avocado was the advertisement. The resorcinol was the formula. Garnier sold the costume of health at a mid-range price. The next brand didn't bother with a costume. It just leaned on being the cheapest, most familiar box in America, and it hides the second and third highest methylene chloride readings in the whole test. Worst, number 3. Revlon ColorSilk. The one your mother used. The one you grab without looking because it's always there. $4, top of the sales charts for years. Not just the affordable option, the American default. The front of the box says no ammonia. That little phrase is doing an enormous amount of work. No ammonia sounds like they finally took something nasty out. They didn't take anything out. They gave it a costume change. Ethanolamine clocked in, did ammonia's exact job, forced your hair cuticle open so the dye could get in. And the only real difference is it doesn't have to put its name on the front of the box. The cuticle still gets cracked. The scalp still absorbs what it absorbs. No ammonia is technically true and practically misleading, which happens to be the beauty industry's favorite flavor of true. And the part they keep off the front entirely? The lab result. In that April 2026 test, ColorSilk came back with the second and third highest methylene chloride readings of any product Consumer Reports examined. Methylene chloride is a probable human carcinogen, banned from consumer paint strippers specifically because of the cancer risk. So the chemical too dangerous to sell you for stripping a door is sitting in the $4 box you put on your head, the one bragging about no ammonia. Fill in the rest from the ingredient panel. PPD in the dye, resorcinol riding shotgun, probable carcinogen, endocrine disruptor, cheapest product on the shelf. You get what you don't pay for. And scroll the reviews long enough, and the pattern stops looking like bad luck. Open sores on the scalp within 2 days. Blistered ears. Facial swelling that sent people to the emergency room. Women who'd used ColorSilk for years with no trouble describe it turning on them overnight. The $4 price was the only safety signal they had, and it was pointing the wrong way. $4 buys you a probable carcinogen and a label engineered so you'd never notice. The reviews are just where the invoice finally arrives. $4. second and third worst in the category. The next brand costs more, has been in more bathrooms for longer, and its name is in the lawsuits too. If you're mentally inventorying your bathroom cabinet right now, subscribe, because the next two brands are the ones most women actually bought. Worst. Number 2. Clairol Nice and Easy. Nice and Easy hit shelves in 1965 with one promise. A woman could color her own hair at home. No salon, no professional, no worry. 60 years later, that promise sits so deep in the culture, you reached for the box without thinking. That wasn't habit. That was 60 years of marketing built specifically so you'd never turn the box over. Lately, the women who stayed loyal the longest are the ones turning on it. The recurring lament from decades-long users runs the same way. A reformulated box that fades inside a week, gray creeping back at the part line, and hair left flat where it used to look fresh. So let's turn it over. The lawsuits and the ingredient databases agree on what's inside: ammonia and aromatic amines, including PPD, while the front of the box stayed quiet about cancer for 6 decades. Quiet pays better. Now the chemistry meets the calendar. Epidemiologists have studied this for years. Women who use permanent dye frequently show higher bladder cancer rates than women who never touch it. Frequently, in real life, means the 6-week cycle. Color the roots, wait, color again. That's the standard gray maintenance schedule. It's the schedule Nice and Easy's own marketing turned into a normal part of being a woman. Every 6 weeks, for decades. The brand knew the schedule. The brand knew the chemistry. The warning still never made it onto the box. And someone is already typing it in the comments. My mother used this for 40 years and she's perfectly fine. She might be. Risk isn't a curse that finds everyone. It's a dial, turned up quietly across millions of women running the same 6-week cycle. The lawsuits aren't about whether it got your mother. They're about whether anyone ever told her it could. In June 2025, the Consolidated California litigation, 12 bladder cancer lawsuits, named Clairol as a defendant. Among the plaintiffs is Deborah Matarazzo, a cosmetologist who spent 11 years applying this color in New Jersey salons. Up to 100 applications a week at her peak, diagnosed in 2017. The complaints allege Clairol had access to the science linking aromatic amines to bladder cancer, and decided the label wasn't the place for it. The plaintiff profiles all rhyme. Women who ran that 6-week cycle for 10, 20, 30 years and had no idea the formula was in active litigation until a diagnosis sent them digging. Nobody who bought Nice and Easy was careless. They were doing precisely what the box trained 3 generations to do. The brand built that trust on purpose, across decades. The lawsuits say it knew what was in the formula the entire time. 60 years on the shelf, 0 years of warning on the label. The next brand managed the same silence, while running the most famous slogan in beauty history right over the top of it. Worst. Number 1. L'Oréal Paris Féria. L'Oréal had a problem. Féria reeks. The chemical punch that hits when you mix the developer was generating complaints. So the company's chemists got to work reformulating it. Kidding. They slipped a little perfume sachet into the kit. A fragrance packet. To cover the smell of the chemistry they didn't feel like changing. Sit with that as a corporate decision. They knew exactly what the formula smelled like. They weighed fix the chemistry against mask it with a scratch and sniff, and the sachet won. You weren't a safety problem to solve. You were a complaint to manage, and the perfume packet loses. The note people sound most often is that the chemical smell doesn't rinse out with the dye. It moves in, settling into the hair and the bathroom for a week, sometimes 2, sachet or no sachet. The smell was worth masking for a reason. In that April 2026 Consumer Reports test, L'Oréal Paris posted the highest methylene chloride levels of anything in the study. Consumer Reports singled them out by name, the country's top-selling hair color brand, sitting at the top of the wrong leaderboard, and publicly called on them to pull the toxic chemicals. Methylene chloride, the probable carcinogen yanked out of paint strippers, highest reading in the test, covered with a perfume packet. This, of course, is the brand that's been telling you since 1973 that you're worth it. Because you're worth it. The most successful line in the history of beauty advertising. The one that turned a $12 box of drugstore dye into a tiny act of self-respect. An entire generation grew up inside that sentence. And the brand reciting it was topping the carcinogen chart while Consumer Reports published the numbers. Worth it. They decided what that was worth, and they decided what it would cost you. This is the part where you think to yourself, If the Food and Drug Administration allows it, how bad can it really be? Ask the European Union. Asked about the PPD in the formula, a separate flagged chemical, also confirmed in Féria. L'Oréal's defense is that the concentration sits below what the Food and Drug Administration permits. Comforting, if you don't ask who set the bar. The European Union looked at that same threshold and decided it wasn't protective enough. Europe restricts ingredients that stay perfectly legal in the American box. Same science, 2 regulators, 2 verdicts. L'Oréal sells you the version that cleared the lower bar. Every lawsuit against the company lands on the same sentence. The permanent dyes leaned on chemicals researchers have tied to cancer, and customers were never told. The suits are active. The slogan is still running. It's still on the box. Because you're worth it was never a promise about the formula. And the part that should genuinely stop you. The cleaner formula existed the whole time. The next 4 brands are the proof. Before the cleaner half of this list, memorize 3 names. PPD, resorcinol, methylene chloride. That last one also shows up on labels dressed as dichloromethane. Same chemical, fancier outfit. See any of the 3 on a permanent dye box, and you are holding the formula these lawsuits are built on. The swaps aren't complicated. If ColorSilk or Nice and Easy is your box, Madison Reed covers the same gray without the courtroom chemistry. If you want the lowest exposure option and can live with coverage that fades instead of snapping to attention at the roots, Natural Instincts is your answer. And when a salon colors your hair, ask what's actually in the bottle before you assume professional means safe, because we just spent 5 brands proving it doesn't. Safer, number 4. Clairol Natural Instincts. Start with the brand that proves the whole thing was a choice. The same company that makes Nice and Easy, in the same labs and the same building, also makes the dye that posted the lowest dichloromethane reading in the entire Consumer Reports test. Clairol Natural Instincts. So when Clairol left the litigation chemistry inside Nice and Easy, it wasn't because the safer version was hard to make. They were making the safer version down the hall the entire time. They just didn't put it on the front of the shelf. Why keep both on the same shelf? Because both make money. Natural Instincts is the gentle one. Nice and Easy is the permanent one. And Clairol is delighted to sell you either. The company doesn't have to pick. You do. $7 to $10 at Target or Walmart. Open the developer and notice what you don't smell. That absence is the formula telling you something the Nice and Easy box spent 60 years not saying. The honest part, since we don't do marketing copy here. Natural Instincts isn't chemical-free. It uses a modified version of PPD designed to be less likely to trigger allergies, and Consumer Reports confirmed resorcinol is in there too. What it doesn't have: ammonia, added parabens, or the sharp chemical hit. Reviewers describe a faint, almost neutral scent with a touch of coconut and hair that comes out soft instead of stripped. It's demi-permanent, so your grays don't vanish. They blur, soften, and fade out over about 28 washes, with no hard line at the roots. If you need total gray elimination, this isn't it. If you want a genuinely lower exposure box that landed among the cleanest in the whole test, it is. Same company, same shelf, one formula they may have to defend in court, and one they built so they'd never have to. Clairol had the safer answer the entire time, and kept the dangerous one at eye level anyway, because both rang the register, and the courtroom was somebody else's problem. The next brand went further than dodging the courtroom. It walked into one on purpose, and a federal judge took its side. Safer, number 3. Madison Reed Radiant Cream Color. There's a question the Avoid brands have spent decades praying nobody would force into a courtroom. Can you actually prove your formula is clean? In December 2023, Madison Reed got the answer none of the giants ever dared go looking for. A federal judge, William Orrick, Northern District of California, ruled that plaintiffs couldn't show the products contained the ammonia, PPD, and resorcinol the brand claims to leave out. The free of claim held up in court. L'Oréal and Clairol have a century of resources between them and never once put their own formulas in front of that test, because their formulas are full of the exact chemicals Madison Reed leaves out. Plenty of brands make clean claims. Almost none have had those claims dragged into federal court and come out intact. That's a different tier of scrutiny than anything on the Avoid list has ever faced. mostly because nothing on the avoid list wanted that scrutiny. Amy Errett founded Madison Reed in 2013 after looking at the ingredients Europe had already restricted and asking the obvious question nobody at the big brands wanted asked. Why are Americans still putting these on their heads? The formula is marketed as 8 free. No ammonia, no PPD, no resorcinol, no parabens, no phthalates, and a few more. Made in Italy, which means European safety standards govern what goes in. Leaping Bunny certified, dermatologist tested, full gray coverage. That last one matters. Full coverage is the exact thing every avoid brand swore was impossible without PPD. Madison Reed built the counterexample, and the disclosure you'll never get from the competitors. Madison Reed uses ethanolamine as its ammonia replacement. A 2022 class action raised concerns about it. It resolved without a trial. Madison Reed still uses it and lists it on the ingredient page where you can read it right now. Consumer Reports also found phthalates in the formula, and you deserve to know that. Not perfect. The difference is that Madison Reed tells you what's in the box instead of pretending you'd never ask. $26 to $30 a kit. Ulta carries it. Walmart carries it. The full shade tool is on their site. By now you're thinking $30 instead of $4, and clean is just a polite word for expensive. The $4 box has a price too. It just isn't printed on the front. One caveat the regulars raise themselves. The color wins people over. Gentle, low on fumes, gray-handled, but the auto ship behind it is far easier to start than to stop. The loudest complaint isn't the dye. It's the charge that keeps landing after you were sure you'd canceled. Every avoid brand insisted full gray coverage required the litigation chemistry. One woman's startup disproved that in a decade. The giants were never stuck. They were comfortable. If a decade sounds fast, the next brand had been doing the same thing since 1970, long before a single lawsuit existed to prove it wrong. Safer. Number 2. Herbatint Permanent Herbal Hair Color. Herbatint contains PPD. The brand says so itself, right on its own FAQ. And this recommendation opens with that fact instead of burying it, because you get the accurate version here, not the flattering one. That alone separates Herbatint from every brand on the avoid list, all of which disclosed nothing until they were forced to. The year was 1970. Nice and Easy was already a household name. L'Oreal was workshopping the slogan that would conquer the next 50 years. And meanwhile, in Italy, a research team was quietly building a permanent color that needed none of the chemistry those two brands would spend the next half-century defending. No ammonia, no resorcinol, no alcohol, no parabens, no synthetic fragrance. The heavy aromatic amine load at the center of the bladder cancer lawsuits left out, with only a low dose of PPD inside an otherwise plant-heavy formula. Most people have never heard of it, not because it failed, because it never had a marketing machine. No drugstore end cap, no celebrity, no slogan. It's sold through health food stores, the corner of the market the big brands don't consider a threat. And they were right not to feel threatened, in the sense that Herbatint never stole their customers. They were wrong in the sense that a tiny Italian company quietly did the thing they kept swearing couldn't be done. PPD at a fraction of the European regulated limit, built around plant extracts instead of high-concentration synthetic oxidative chemistry, is a genuinely different load on your scalp than a box of permanent drugstore dye. Long-term reviewers with sensitive scalps, autoimmune conditions, and hair loss from years of conventional color report Herbatint as the first one that didn't punish them. Faint herbal smell, a gel that doesn't run. One practical note, it comes up a shade darker than the box on the first application, so plan for it. $13 to $17. Whole Foods stocks it. iHerb ships it. And the part that should make you angry. Every time a drugstore giant swore permanent color was impossible without the chemistry now sitting in these lawsuits, the disproof was on a health food store shelf the entire time, and had been since 1970. They didn't lack the formula. They lacked a reason to bother building it. Herbatint took the chemistry out of permanent color. The last brand asked what color looks like when it was never in the bottle at all, and the answer smells like candy. Safer. Number 1. Arctic Fox Semi-Permanent Hair Color. Open a box of conventional dye and the smell arrives before you've mixed anything. That chemical signature is so normal in this category that most women stopped registering it as a warning years ago. Arctic Fox smells like candy. Not as a figure of speech. Across hundreds of reviews, the first thing women mention is the smell. Sweet, almost fruity, Nothing like what a lifetime of hair dye taught them to brace for. Women who switched described that smell as the exact moment they understood what they'd been putting on their scalp. Not a review, a reckoning. A $10 indie brand solved the smell problem a billion-dollar industry spent decades insisting was just the price of color. The industry didn't have different chemistry available. It had different priorities. Arctic Fox simply made those priorities visible. Here's the move that sets it apart. Arctic Fox started from the question, what does vivid color look like if PPD, ammonia, and peroxide were never in the equation? The ingredient list is the proof. Conditioning agents and direct dyes. None of the oxidative machinery. Not a trace of peroxide, ammonia, or PPD. And Arctic Fox doesn't frame methylene chloride as something it heroically removed. It was simply never part of the formula, which is why the ingredient list reads more like a conditioner than a chemistry set. That's not a brand promising to do better. It's a brand that never built the problem in the first place. Read the reviews, and the same story keeps surfacing. Brighter color, softer hair. None of the burning people had quietly accepted as normal. Women with hair wrecked by years of oxidative dye describe Arctic Fox as the first product that added color without continuing the damage. You're probably waiting for the catch. Something this gentle and this cheap usually has one. The honest limit. Arctic Fox is semi-permanent. It does not cover gray. If you need full gray coverage, that's Madison Reed and Herbatint above. This one is for the woman who wants vivid color between applications, or who's prioritizing her scalp over chasing grays. Sally Beauty and Ulta both carry it, $10 to $17. The Avoid brands swore you needed the litigation chemistry to get real color. A $10 indie ran the whole thing without it and got brighter results, which means the chemistry was never essential to the color. Arctic Fox built the proof and charged you $10. The giants built the problem and charged you more. Cosmetologists with bladder cancer are in a courtroom right now. The chemistry that put them there, PPD, resorcinol, methylene chloride, sat in bathroom cabinets for decades while the marketing got prettier and the warning never got written. The cleaner formula existed the whole time. The Avoid brands just never put it on the shelf because the shelf was making money exactly as it was. If your honest reaction is, why am I only hearing this now? Hold on to it. None of this was secret. The lawsuits are simply where ignoring it got harder. So, subscribe to Face Value. We read the panel, run the sourcing, and name the brand. And we take no sponsors, which makes super thanks the entire budget. The video on screen now is your next one. Go check your cabinet tonight. If Nice and Easy, Féria, or ColorSilk is in there, you finally have what should have been on the label. And if someone you love has run that 6-week cycle for years, never knowing it's named in active litigation, send her this before her next touch-up. The industry had the science. The label had the room. The warning was a choice they made sure not to make.